move this too far, Nigel won't find it. I want to welcome you to a conference that was an idea of ours in the college for several years, but we really needed to let it digest and percolate until we had a really clear sense that we were ready to move forward. And that was mostly me, because I was going to try to do most of the coordinating, because our faculty are busy enough. So they were very helpful in connecting me to individuals, and the breadth of things that we're going to cover in this conference are pretty not only reflective of our college, but they are reflective of the range of problems in the surrounding society that we really need to be aware of and see how people are addressing in some really creative and effective ways. And our first speaker is Nigel Hatton, who is coming to us from UC Merced, right down the road, and we're really thrilled to have several of their speakers on our program doing some amazingly interesting work. So Nigel's going to speak not only from his academic background, but his experience teaching in prisons, and he's going to talk to us about his prison education project. Nigel?
First, I'd like to thank Dr. James Tuedo and the planners of this conference. Thank you for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be part of a dialogue that is thinking about social justice in the Central Valley. Today, I am supposed to weave and balance the academic and also the activist or the praxis. So I wanted to talk about work that I've done at San Quentin State University, or San Quentin State Prison, right? Yeah. And also through the Prison Education Project, which is based in Southern California and is born out of one of the organizers of the Hangover series, or one of these important television programs, but someone that became involved in prison education. And the title is Justice Through the Embrace of Dante and Virgil, because what I want to argue or have us think about is a reimagining of that relationship that we have to human beings who find themselves incarcerated or condemned by the state. The first program, the Prison University Project, is based at San Quentin, and it's run by a woman named Jody Lewin. And Jody Lewin has done an amazing job of building resources and collecting faculty and scholars interested in teaching inside prisons, and those in the Bay Area mostly. But they have created an associate's degree program that inmates at San Quentin State Prison can enroll in, and they can take classes in the sciences, the social sciences, the humanities, and the arts. And these classes lead to an associate's degree. And there are even examples of prisoners or those who served time on the inside. Once they got out, they were able to transfer to a 4-year university. So it's a very effective program and brings together faculty from across the Bay Area universities. And I've taught in this program since about 2003, teaching literature classes, philosophy courses, writing courses. And what's fascinating is that it is a program, when you teach in it, once you get beyond the gate and the administration of the prison, it's like being in any other classroom in the world. You have excited students, you have students who are eager to learn, you have students who are nervous about the first day of class, right? Here you have men who have been involved in who knows, but this excitement that they have about education is something that I see when I teach at university anywhere. So this is quite fascinating to me. The Prison Education Project is a similar program that not only runs the founding of this program came out of the belief that we should use the universities that are in the vicinity of the prisons that are within the United States. So if there is a CSU Stanislaus, if there's a UC Merced, if there's a Modesto Junior College within a certain vicinity of a state prison, then why not use that scholarship, those scholars, those students, to educate those who are in the prison, with the understanding that statistics show, and I'm only going to say statistics once, show that recidivism rates drop, right, when those who are incarcerated participate in these kinds of education programs. I've seen those numbers and I believe in them, so. So the Prison Education Project, which also is international and provides scholars to teach in Uganda and other parts of the world, again, with the understanding that education has this great possibility. Here are a number of other programs. The Inside Out Center, which has programs at the University of Oregon, but also back east. And this allows students enrolled in universities to study alongside those who are incarcerated. The idea that the experience is going to benefit both. There is in Canada, you have another version of this called Walls to Bridges. And Walls to Bridges is similar to the Inside Out program, but has a different philosophy. My point in bringing you and giving you this preliminary overview of these kinds of education programs is to sort of question and make us think critically about their role in our society. One theory goes that these programs are nothing more than study abroad tours for clueless progressive people, right? In other words, people who want to take their activism and their seemingly progressive ideas about how we can change the prison, but participate in a kind of spectacle. And on the one hand, while they're brought to these programs to teach, really they are the ones who are learning. And so does that really benefit those who are on the inside? One way we think about this is the San Quentin State Prison, the Prison University Project, and this is the CEO of Facebook, right? And he is in a conversation with some Ali Tambura, who was in a class that I taught, and a number of classes that I taught at the prison. And the question is, on the one hand, while it is good that those like Mark Zuckerberg and those who are interested in transforming the prison and the way in which we think about the prison in our society and the necessity of this prison, if we read this image, does this image represent Mark Zuckerberg understanding his subjectivity, that is, his life as tied to the life of Ali Tambura? So, to put this another way, if those who teach in these programs are committed to change and the philosophy of education that can bring about this change, do they see this as something that involves a kind of intersubjectivity in which there's a desperation almost, right? That the freedom of this human being next to or in relationship to their own freedom brings about a kind of despair, a desperation, an immediacy in which they are working desperately to bring about this change? Or is it simply something that I do so that I can gain moral points in my society, right? Right, it's good to put on my resume. It shows that I am in the right camp. It shows that I want to make change. So if we read the picture, right, what can we say about that relationship? The white shirt, the blue shirt, the smile, the seriousness, versus does this mean I am going to go home and think about justice as tied to the subjectivity of that human being who's incarcerated, or do I simply say, I wanted to involve myself in this program, and once I leave these gates, I'll move on to the next humanitarian endeavor. And what I turn to ask us to go back to Dante, the poet Dante, right? And to think about the Commedia and to think about the Inferno. And one thing we notice when we read the Inferno, or we think about people who are reading the Inferno in the Middle Ages, is that even in a society that is greatly structured in terms of belief and what people have the right to believe, or how they negotiate belief and their relationship to religion, there in the Inferno by Dante, you can see the relationship of the condemned to Dante, or the poet who is going out through the Inferno, one in which that desperation that I'm talking about is present. So if we, in the contemporary or modern context, understand ourselves as separate or different from those who are condemned, those who are reading Dante's Inferno in a contemporary manner felt that they understood those who were condemned in relationship to their own subjectivity. So that, much like thinking of the way in which James Baldwin writes about Angela Davis's imprisonment, it's to say that if we don't speak up for you, then they will come for us tomorrow, right? So what I read the Inferno for is a way in which it can transform this particular image, and how it transforms those who participate in education programs and how they think of their own lives in relationship to the lives of those who have been condemned or who are serving time for various crimes. The Inferno is a text that has been rewritten many times by those who admired Dante's accomplishment. And you have Camus, for example, setting it in Amsterdam, right? And recasting the Inferno in the space of Amsterdam. You have Amira Baraka, who recast the Inferno and the Hell of Inferno in Newark, New Jersey. So he takes Dante's Inferno and sets it in Newark. So there are a number of examples in which you see that those who have read this poem and have tried to recast it or rethink it or translate it for the contemporary, to speak to modern times, to speak to our reality, and in doing so, to suggest that those kinds of exchanges that we see in the Inferno, that is, when someone sees the grotesque, when someone sees those who are in the various circles of hell because they have committed different types of crimes, the way that they relate themselves to those human beings is not one of othering. It is not one in which they try to ignore, to compartmentalize, to set aside, to understand themselves as vastly and radically different, but they clearly see that this could be them. This could be their life. This could be something that affects them greatly, that they, or Mark Zuckerberg, could be in the shoes of Ali Tambora. I would say, in an image like this, those who are in one position say that they would never, ever find themselves in Ali Tambora's position. So a radical reshifting of the relationship in which those who are advocating on behalf of prisoners or who are participating in education programs is necessary if this educative process, these programs that have emerged across the United States, are to transform from mere spectacle into something that actually starts to have a profound impact. I don't want to go over the numbers. I mean, we certainly know about the incarceration rates of the United States in terms of it being the nation that incarcerates the largest number of human beings. We know that 30 minutes from us, we have the largest women's prison in the world. There are different ways in which you can articulate the problem that is before us in terms of the prison industrial complex. We know that it is a major part of our economy and that it, in California in particular, it accounts for a vast amount of resources. It's a way to social mobility and the comforts of a great life. I know that on our campus and in this campus as well, that the California Department of Corrections recruits heavily and wants graduates of CSU Stanislaus and graduates of UC Merced to join the ranks of the prison industrial complex as guards. So there's a way in which it is not only something that is the warehousing of human life, but it becomes something that is part of the very economy. Here are, these numbers are certainly have shifted, but it gives us a sense of the way in which we can think about incarceration. Right, and you can look at the great salaries that people make. So the necessity of the prison, right, and its dependence in terms of our economy is something that cannot be denied. But this is why I turn back to the text of Dante, right? And the text of Dante, if you read it, you see within those circles of hell these very grotesque figures and shades and shadows of selves of those who have committed various sins and find themselves in the particular circles of hell. But even with their condemnation, right, when you see Dante in relationship with Virgil the poet, Virgil is a poet, right, because because of his, but no mistake of his own. It's simply a matter of his circumstance that has been condemned, right, as a sort of not coming with Christianity. But even if the medieval reader understands that they cannot move or sympathize, that they must understand Virgil's plight, there's a way in which the poem allows the contact between Dante and Virgil to be one in which they literally embrace throughout the text. So even as Dante understands Virgil's plight, he is able to understand and think of a way in which he can understand Virgil as someone who is worthy of and should be thought of in relationship to his own subjectivity. So the Inferno, even if it can't allow a medieval reader to remove the sins of the sinner, still has that reader thinking about his or her own life in relationship to those who have committed these sins. And this is the way in which I'm thinking we can borrow from that period and how we can mine literature, right, as a means for trying to get around what would be referred to as the rigidity of justice. So what am I supposed to do if I am teaching in the prison? What am I supposed to do if I want to bring about change? What more can I do against the great systemic measures that have been taken to create and allow this prison industrial complex to continue? What I argue is that if you rethink your relationship to those very human beings, right, this becomes a means for trying to recast how we understand ourselves. So that in our society, the education program that involves inmates and students should not be mere spectacle. It should be something that is supported by the government. It should be something that all human beings participate in and know about. It should be connected to the departments of the university. It should have proper funding. Indeed, now the president says that there will be Pell Grants for those who study while incarcerated. But even beyond that, those who participate in programs that are designed to help have to have a kind of ethical consideration in which they rethink their own relationship to those who are inside. Teaching inside the prisons makes this something that is quite easy to do. When you teach classes there and you work with students, you don't know what they have done to have brought about this incarceration. But you do know that they are eager to read the text, that they are eager to discuss the text, and that they respond to assignments in ways that are consistent with how students anywhere do in terms of the desire to work and to do the work. And so this notion of rethinking one's relationship to those who are condemned, right, is a way in which you can, just by the very practice of education, make this kind of a change. And part of what has brought about this concern, right, is that to think that earlier statement of Jody Lewin saying this is a kind of study abroad program for progressives who want to get a sense of what the prison is about, who want to understand themselves as moral human beings. But even in that understanding of themselves as moral human beings, there's no way that they ever stand themselves as facing a similar plight or a possibility as those who are on the inside. And then this, for us, has to change. And when we read the Inferno, we think of Virgil. He's unbaptized, he's damned, his fate is sealed. But even when we read it, we think and look at his fate as one that the Dante who goes along and is guided by Virgil, there's a relationship in which you don't see Dante understanding himself as different, but actually Dante is looking at Virgil and seeing what there is in common, and that he's very concerned. The great despair that he has for Virgil's plight, for me, is representative of the despair that one must have or understand when teaching or working within prison settings. And I think it's this genuine faith or genuine concern, this move away from this rigid justice and looking at how one can rethink the relationship to the law, not breaking the law, right, but just by the mere relationship you have to the human beings who are incarcerated, how that alone is something that transforms our thinking of the prison in our imaginary. So it moves from the spectacle to something that is a genuine concern and strikes at my very core. This can happen in the education programs, but at the moment, right, these education programs, for all the good that they're doing, still rise to that level of thinking of those who teach in them as vastly different and not subject to the same kinds of conditions or possibilities of those who are their students. And this is part of what I'm looking to change. Inside the prison, one of the things that the geographers talk about with the prison industrial complex is the way in which those who have become a part of it enter into a landscape or a spatial reality that is very similar to what they grew up in, right? So if this is the projects, right, then when one is living in the projects and gets in trouble and finds oneself incarcerated, the vision of the prison, right, versus the projects is not that different. So one moves from a space that was familiar to a space that is also familiar, right? And the ease with which one is able to recognize the coordinates or the signs of the prison space and relate them to the space where one grew up or understood as home makes that transition one that also contributes to keeping this industrial complex intact. So those who are incarcerated in many of the prisons in the United States feel right at home because the place that they have come to is also very much connected to the place that they have left. If we rethink this relationship of those who participate in these programs to the prison education programs and to those who are the students of the prison education programs, this also is something that can shift for us in reimagining these spaces that take human beings from the comfort of the ghettos and projects of the United States to the comfort of the prison space. And so the disruption I'm suggesting that those who participate in education programs can have is one that shifts if they radically rethink their own subjectivity to the actual program itself. So that it's not just a matter of curriculum or pedagogy or teaching a class, it's the actual thinking of one's being and understanding of the self in relationship to the class itself, so that you can be the teacher or understand yourself as the teacher, but you also can understand yourself as possibly being a student. And when you do this, this changes the way we think about the very relationship or how we understand education. In my writing on this, I think a lot about this term despair, right? And how we look at the despair of those who are facing sentences, long sentences or life sentences, those who are facing the despair of what the prison industrial complex does in terms of dehumanization. But what we see in the Inferno is that that we can extrapolate and understand that that this rethinking of how you understand yourself in relationship to those who have been asked to serve a particular sentence or have committed a crime is something that you have the ability to change. So it's not to say that you understand yourself as the good moral teacher who has now come to this place in which you have human beings who have done horrible things, and now you plan to educate them, and in this process you are going to help them change their lives, but rather their despair and your despair is something that is going to speak to the very need to change this particular process, so that the incarceration of human beings you feel are in their proper place does not remove the need to believe in a moment in which those violent acts and the violent place will be removed and replaced by good. The notion of despair is important for the distinctions I want to make between this world of Dante, right, and the world of our now. I wish I had time to sort of close read this text, but you can actually point to the moments in which Dante is touching Virgil, or Virgil is leading Dante by the hand, Virgil is embracing Dante, Virgil is comforting Dante as he sees the grotesque visions of those who are within the circles of hell, and so the journey is something that is familiar and yet is also strange. But it is this strangeness and this familiarity that I think gives us the chance to think of our times and what it means to say that I'm going to recast or rethink my relationship to those who find themselves incarcerated. And it's not that I here want to return to a kind of barbarity of the medieval period, or to say that we are trying to transform ourselves into the time in which Dante lived or that Dante wrote about, right? I understand that this is quite different, but rethinking our relationship to incarcerated human beings is bound, while it's bound to be an imperfect project, but I do think that it is something that can help us to find a way to rethink and transform this very project of the prison. The leader of the Prison University Project, Jody Lewin, says this. This is a quote from her. She says, "Long before we ever realize it, we are learning to imagine people in prisons as grotesque, subhuman caricatures, criminals, prisoners, ex-convicts, parolees." This is her continued. "They're the stuff of horror movies, nightmares, Halloween costumes, primetime television, and offhand jokes." What she says is one of the most powerfully and potentially world-changing aspects of the program at San Quentin is that it allows outsiders to actually meet and get to know human beings who are literally subject to these categories. So those categories of criminal, prisoner, ex-convict, parolee, those who become like a Halloween caricature or someone who's deemed subhuman, these categories, right, or these descriptions fit the descriptions that we see in the Inferno. And what Lewin is saying is that the education process, or those who teach in prisons, get a chance to dispel and remove those false images of human beings. And so they actually get to understand human beings as human beings. But what perhaps is missed in that, right, is that on the one hand, it is something that allows those who have previously understand the incarcerated human beings as demons to change that view, but does it then allow those human beings to understand themselves as human in the same way. And this is where I'm saying that these education programs have to shift their thinking. So in that sense, it doesn't mean that we forget what they have done. Rather, we want to embrace them, have dialogue about how we can remove and prevent further injustice in the world, and stop the fast flow of human beings into the inferno. So then it takes us to an image like this. And this image, I think, as if we look at it and in contrast to the image of Zuckerberg and Ali Tambora, this is President Obama, right, who is the first president in office to visit a prison and discuss reform with inmates. But we get a sense, if we read, right, the white shirt is the same, but here he is sitting in a forum and having a discussion. I won't go as far as to say that the president is understanding his subjectivity is tied to those that he's in conversation with, but I will say that I think that he doesn't understand this as spectacle or something that is going to give him moral status. I think that he does, like that world of the inferno, understand that he has the creativity and the space to reimagine or rethink his own subjectivity in relationship to those who he finds, who he's in conversation with. So if these programs that I have participated in are to work, I'm thinking that the president's stance here or approach, this is symbolic, we don't know for sure, is one that we prefer to what the CEO of Facebook has done when I began. And so in that sense, I want us to, in conclusion, to think about the way in which in the medieval world, or those readers of Dante who had their lives very structured, they had very clear and strict limits on the ways in which they interpreted belief, right? That we can speak about their lives and believers can tell us how they felt about certain, how they read particular signs, how their beliefs were ordered. But even with that structure, right, those who were living in this period, or those who were reading Dante, still had the ability to rethink or compare or to make comparisons within those structures that allowed them to look at someone who was condemned or to the circles of hell and to say that life matters in relationship to my own life. That the reason I must be concerned with this, the reason I must despair over this, the reason that I must worry, the reason that I must pay attention, the reason I must teach is because that subjectivity is connected to mine. So even in a limit system, one has the ability to think outside of the confines of restriction and make this connection to human beings. This is the reading that I do of the Inferno. Not so much in the present, right? We can understand ourselves as participating in activities with those who are deemed other or those who are condemned or who find themselves incarcerated, but we see ourselves as vastly different. This is a place I'm going to go, and at 5 o'clock I'm leaving, and I can go think about other things. It's that thinking about other things and that ability to move in and to move out that I see as problematic. And with Dante's Inferno, my hope is that reading that period next to ours is something that allows us to change. Thank you. I just want to go back to that image because I like it, and I like for students to read it. Right, you read a visual text, and I like students to read what's going on. It's great that he has decided to devote and bring attention to the problem of incarceration in our society, and he accompanied it with a very compelling post about the concept of justice, and I think all of this is good. but I do want him to be a bit more tragic about it. So yes.
I'm wondering some of the specifics about how they become, how the inmates become enrolled in the class. Do they have to take placement tests? Are there, so that if they can't place in what would be like English 101, do you guys have remedial classes for them as well, so that there's not just a group that's left behind and they can't place in college level right away?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And so the answer, direct answer is yes. They do have a beginner course that becomes before 101, and a course that you have to take as many times as necessary before you show that you have the ability to move on to 101. So you need at least your GED, and because the state is required to support education and inmates to study to the GED, they have that. But yes, before they can enroll in the program, they must take this introductory course. And what I'll say about that course in relationship to my talk, is that, these are, in the case of San Quentin, men who have committed violent crimes or who are lifers or who have any number of other concerns. But in that class, their anxiety and nervousness about education is like a freshman who is in his first or her first class at college. And so that, for me, is, it says, I read it in a number of ways, right? I mean, certainly the survey of the classes that I've taught, 90% of the students say that they did not finish their high school education. Right? So they did not have access to a proper education. So we say that what if they did have that right and chance to be curious as an adolescent about education in the way in which they are being curious right now within the prison setting. So what happened to that ability to be the sort of naive and curious student? So that is one. Two, it shows the commitment and seriousness with which they are taking education right now. And no one is to say that this isn't something that they would have done had they had the opportunity before they committed a crime. So there are a number of observations that can be made within that introductory course. And when they don't pass it and take it again, they understand why. And I wouldn't say that there's frustration. I would say that they're eager to take it again because they want to learn. So all of these human activities, human anxieties that are all the more reason why we have to erase the divide of us thinking them as monsters who are now trying to transform themselves into human beings again. They were human beings before, they're human beings now, and they're human beings, yeah. Yes.
I was looking at the statistics of those that were incarcerated that were in other countries.
What was that word? Statistics?
Yes, and you only said once.
Yeah.
I can say it once.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, I was looking at that, and it was very, very interesting looking at the difference between the United States and, say, Norway.
Mm.
I was wondering why there was such a large disparity in the differences between other countries and us. Is it because we have a three-strikes law? Is it because of racism in our country? Is it because we have more population and so therefore there are more crimes per capita?
Yeah.
And it was just very interesting, the numbers.
So I think there are any complex number of reasons related to, right, as you say, racism, the war on drugs, the rise of incarceration that is a reaction to attempts to make society more safe, right, or this concept of safety. So I think there's another chart that kind of looks at you can see from a decade's view of where the change really starts to take place. Right, so you see where this war on drugs begins, certainly. But the example of Norway, for my purposes, is, right, as you know, they have they had a recent massacre in Norway, and the man who committed the massacre is imprisoned, and his sentence is 22 years, even if he killed multiple people. I mean, certainly they have a way to keep him imprisoned again once his sentence is up. But he is enrolled in the political science department at the University of Oslo. So the top university in the nation has him enrolled in their political science department as a student. Of course, he takes these through correspondence courses, but they see him, even despite this horrible crime that he committed, as someone who should be thought about, or who should have access to the state in the same way as those who have not committed a single crime. And right, it's the population, it's the 3 million population, all-white Norway. I mean, we can say why they want to do that, but it is striking that most of these countries have programs in terms of education that are connected to the state. It's not a group of progressive volunteers who are trying to put together something out of nothing. It's centralized, and it relates to the way in which they want to rehabilitate someone back into the society, whereas I think our warehouse project is one that is to keep people condemned forever and to create a great wall between how we think of ourselves in relationship to those who have been incarcerated. I mean, think about where we live now. There are prisons everywhere, and yet we don't really acknowledge that reality. So I think Norway, they do try to think about that intersubjectivity, even with the most horrible person who's committed the most horrible crime.